In the remote Athabascan village of Mento, Alaska, things are usually quiet. Nestled 130 miles northwest of Fairbanks, this tiny community of roughly 200 people sits on a hill overlooking the Tolovana River. Generations of Alaska natives have grown up here, building their families, living off the land, following traditions that stretch back centuries. Many residents live off the grid, no internet, no running water, a way of life that most Americans can barely imagine. But on the morning of the 2nd of May 2013, the silence of this peaceful village was shattered by a phone call that would change everything. Lifelong Mento resident Lori Baker received that call from 24-year-old Carlene Charlie, a young woman who had known Lori's son Jordan since childhood. Lori would later recall that moment with devastating clarity. The phone rang. I said, "Hello." She said, "Lori, Jordan's been stabbed." And my immediate reaction is, "Where?" Carlene told Lori that Jordan had been house-sitting for a cousin, and that's where she had found him. In a village with no 911 service, there was no time to wait for help to arrive. Lori and her boyfriend rushed to the home, just down the street from her own. It took 2 to 3 minutes, and we were there, Lori remembered. When we walked in, I seen my son laying on the couch in the living room. There was a big couch, and then blood all over the floor, blood all over the couch. What Lori encountered was a brutal, horrifically bloody scene. Her 26-year-old son had been stabbed multiple times in what investigators would later describe as a crime of cold-blooded rage. Lori sent her boyfriend to summon help from Mento's medical emergency services. In rural Alaskan communities like this one, healthcare is provided by village health aides, dedicated individuals trained for emergencies, but hardly equipped for what they were about to face. Fairbanks Memorial Hospital was 126 miles away. An ambulance wasn't coming. Help would have to come from within. While she waited, Lori did the only thing she could do. She tried to save her son's life. I began to apply pressure on his chest, and I'm calling his name, she recalled. He was barely alive. Behind her, Carlene was falling apart. "Carlene is behind me, just yelling at me to save him, to help him," Lori said, and I turned around, and I told her to shut up and sit down. Minutes later, the health aides arrived and began working frantically. They cut away Jordan's shirt, revealing multiple stab wounds. They searched for any signs of life, trying everything they knew. But after a few more agonizing minutes, it became clear that there was nothing more anyone could do. I looked at one of our health aides, Lori remembered. She shook her head, and I knew. They stopped their efforts. Someone brought a sheet. Lori covered her son. I kissed him on the forehead. The following account is based on official police records, court documents, and footage that has rarely been seen until now. It is a story of obsession, rejection, and a rage so consuming that it destroyed 2 young lives and shook an entire community to its core. To understand what happened to Jordan Baker, we need to go back to the beginning, to a childhood spent in this remote village, where everyone knows everyone, and where one young woman's unrequited love would eventually turn deadly. Jordan Baker was born in 1987 and raised in the native community of Mento as a proud member of the Athabascan tribe. In this village, family extended far beyond blood relations. We are one big family.
Whenever someone is in need, we look out for each other.
We're a close community. Somebody gets a moose, somebody can't go out hunting themselves. We give them some of our meat. That's just how it's been. It's just part of our tradition.
They have gatherings and the whole village comes. Everybody participates, everybody contributes. And a lot of this happens at Lori Baker's house. She's got one of the biggest houses there.
Lori had a big family to fill it. There was a total of 8 of them, she explained. We took in nephews and nieces, but we had 4 children of our own. Jordan was the oldest. Growing up in Mento, all the children felt like siblings, regardless of whose house they actually lived in. Jordan was often the ringleader of their adventures. He was always the one that would just come up with an idea, one childhood friend recalled.
Jordan, he was always the one that would just come up with an idea, like playing kick the can out on the roads and hide and seek around like the whole village, just hanging out at each other's houses, so we just a big group of us.
But as Jordan and his peers grew into teenagers, they found less innocent ways to entertain themselves. In a place with no movie theaters, no shopping centers, no nightclubs, entertainment options were severely limited. There's no such thing as Walmart. There's no such thing as the movies. There's no such thing as going to the club, one resident explained. So that's where it becomes interesting, because fun in a village setting can be kind of dangerous sometimes. Mento was what's known as a local option community, meaning alcohol is officially prohibited. But that didn't stop it from making its way in. It's not your typical cocktail hour, one source noted.
It's heavy drinking until you might not remember the next day.
Throughout the evolution from childhood games to all-night parties, there was one young woman who had been a part of Jordan's life from the very start, Carlene Charlie. These two had grown up on the same street, their lives intertwined from their earliest memories. And from a young age, Carlene had developed feelings for Jordan that went far beyond friendship. She was crazy about him, Lori Baker remembered.
And I could remember her being a little girl coming to visit and wanting to move in with us. So it started out at a very young age.
And I could remember her being a little girl coming to visit and wanting to move in with us. So it started out at a very young age. Lori Baker, like Jordan, Carlene was steeped in the culture and traditions of the Athabascan tribe. She was musically talented, learning to play the drums, and performing with local bands in the village. The Charlie family was wide-ranging and well-respected in the community. But by the time she was a teenager, Carlene had turned her attention back to her childhood crush with an intensity that would prove troubling. It was literally like the world started and stopped with him, one person close to the situation observed. In her mind, that's her future husband. There was just one problem. Jordan didn't feel the same way. For him, Carlene was a friend, nothing more, with occasional exceptions. There was a sexual relationship, one source confirmed. Most of the time it was alcohol-fueled, but the emotional investment was entirely one-sided. For him, it was just, we drink. Every now and then we hook up, and I'll see you when I see you, so to speak. Jordan made his feelings or lack thereof clear on multiple occasions. Jordan and Carlene were friends. Lori Baker explained. Carlene, in her sick mind, always thought her and Jordan were going to be together. They were going to be married. She was told several times by Jordan, by myself, that it was never going to happen and she ought to just move on. But Carlene couldn't move on. In her mind, she had constructed an elaborate fantasy of their future together, a fantasy that had no basis in reality. In her mind, she had created this relationship. One investigator later observed, she had created this idea that they were going to get married. Nobody really knew the monster that was underneath. When Jordan was 23, his carefree existence was interrupted by a devastating loss. His father passed away on the 2nd of November 2010. As any child that loses a parent, I lost my father, so I knew exactly how my children felt. Lori said, it had an impact on their lives. Jordan was mad. I remember that clearly. The day his father passed away, he was mad. In the wake of his father's death, Jordan threw himself into a variety of pursuits, searching for meaning and direction. Jordan was just unique in his own way, Lori recalled fondly.
Jordan was just unique in his own way. He got into gardening. He started trying different things, cooking and making dinners. And he also worked as a firefighter. And he worked in the community as well, doing different jobs.
By 2013, 26-year-old Jordan had identified a path forward. He announced to his family that he wanted to turn one of his passions into a career. He was in the process of filling out paperwork to attend school. Lori explained, he wanted to pursue cooking. He was turning towards making it better for himself. Jordan Baker had dreams. He had plans. He had a future stretching out before him. But on the 2nd of May 2013, all of that came to a violent end. As Jordan's mother said goodbye to her son, the village health aides summoned law enforcement from the nearest major city. In Fairbanks, investigators Henry Ching and Kirsten Hansen received the call. Investigator Hansen and I were approached by the Alaska Bureau of Investigation, Ching recalled. They told us, hey, we got a homicide in Mento. You guys need to suit up and head out. Investigating a crime in a remote Alaskan village presents unique challenges that most law enforcement officers never face. One of the challenges for investigating a crime scene out in one of the villages is logistics. Back in Mento, the scene was chaotic. You've got just a terribly bloody scene in the middle of a village where it takes hours for the troopers to even arrive, one source described. In the first couple of hours, it's absolute chaos.
you've got just a terribly bloody scene in the middle of a village where it takes hours for the troopers to even arrive. In the first couple of hours, it's absolute chaos.
A VPSO, village public safety officer, kept a watch over the deceased. It's just a matter of just waiting for law enforcement to arrive.
A village public safety officer kept watch over the deceased while the community waited for the state troopers to arrive. It's just a matter of just waiting for law enforcement to arrive, one resident explained. With the crime scene secured, Jordan's mother Lori and his friend Carlene departed from the house. "We go to my home," Lori said.
By then, word has gotten out. And when something like this happens, a death in our community, regardless of how the person passed away, we gather at the family's home.
When investigators Ching and Hansen finally arrived from Fairbanks, accompanied by a crime scene technician, they were confronted with a nightmare. As you entered, it was a living room area. Ching described, there was a light-colored couch, blood on the floor, blood on the couch, bloody footprints everywhere. Jordan Baker lay on the couch, covered with a sheet. He was wearing only a t-shirt, no bottoms. When Ching removed the sheet, the brutality of the attack became sickeningly clear. I immediately noticed deep stab wounds in his chest, upper torso area, the investigator recalled. As he surveyed the scene, Ching began building a picture of what had happened. He stabbed somebody in the chest 5 times. "That's personal," he observed. "I noticed he had defensive wounds on his forearms and on his hands, and that's from obviously trying to fight off the person with a knife." The number of wounds and the defensive injuries told investigators something important about this crime. That many stab wounds and the defensive wounds, typically, when you see that, it shows a lot of anger, Ching explained. Something triggered that to make them violently attack like that. The investigators began their search for the murder weapon. "I knew it had to be somewhere," Ching said. "This person isn't going to stab Jordan and then walk around the village with a knife." Standing outside the cabin, Ching tried to put himself in the killer's mindset. "I was like, man, if I was him, what would I do?" He looked over to the side, spotted the bluff nearby, and thought, "I would chuck it." What happened next was almost supernatural. A raven caught Ching's attention, circling and then landing in the snow before taking off again. I got about 30 yards from the house, and I saw a little hole in the ground with a raven footprint, and there was some blood on it, Ching recalled. "And that's where I found the murder weapon." The discovery struck him as remarkable. "That's odd. Why would the raven, land right there?"
I was like, that's odd. Why would the raven, land right there?
Their next step after finding the knife, who does the knife belong to? We've got to find the suspect.
One thing was certain. This was not a random crime. It wasn't a crime where someone just walked into town and did this, Ching observed. We're talking Mento, Alaska. 200 people. You're not just going to come walking into a place like that, commit a crime, and then just leave. Everybody knows everybody. So when you come into a village as an outsider, everybody looks. The killer was someone Jordan knew, someone from within the community. And investigators had their first lead. Witnesses at the crime scene told them that Carlene Charlie had been the first to report the stabbing. When investigator Hansen asked Lori where Carlene was, she explained that she had sent the young woman away. "She's just wailing," Lori recalled. "And I think at one point I told her to calm down. I think I told her cousin or aunt, whoever, to take her home." Lori also told investigators about her last conversation with her son. He says, "Mom, I'm not too sure what I'm going to do tonight. We might watch a movie." I said, "Who's we?" He said, "I don't know, a few of us." "Carlene." I said, "Well, son, be careful. You know I love you." Those were the last words Lori Baker ever spoke to her son. Investigators tracked down 24-year-old Carlene at her cousin Francine's house.
When they got there to go look for her, she wasn't there.
Investigators tracked down 24-year-old Carlene at her cousin Francine's house. Investigators found Carlene with her head on the table, in obvious distress, one source noted. For investigative purposes, she was photographed from head to toe. The images revealed a disturbing detail. She had blood all over her. During the initial interview, Carlene explained that she and Jordan had known each other their entire lives. She described their relationship as off and on, non-sexual. though she acknowledged occasional physical encounters. "I don't believe that they were ever boyfriend and girlfriend," Hansen noted. "It was very low-key and just strictly sexual." Carlene then laid out her version of events from the night of the murder. She said she had been hanging out with Jordan at his cousin's house when their friend Tyler arrived. Carlene and Jordan were eating dinner, and Tyler shows up with some alcohol, one source summarized. The three of them had been partying, drinking liquor purchased from one of the village's bootleggers. According to Carlene, she had quickly begun feeling the effects of the alcohol. While trying to cut her steak, the knife slipped, and she cut her finger. Needing a bandage, she went to her grandmother's house. About an hour later, Carlene told investigators she decided to rejoin her friends, but as she approached the house, she heard fighting inside. She waited outside, uncertain what to do. Then she saw a hooded figure leave the residence. He had pulled his hoodie over his head and reached down to the ground and grabbed something, and then just walked out and walked right down the street, she claimed. When asked who she thought the hooded figure was, Carlene pointed the finger directly at Tyler. After the figure left, Carlene said she went inside and found Jordan bleeding on the couch. That's when she called Lori Baker. Investigators collected all of Carlene's bloody clothing as evidence. They also recovered a bloody sweatshirt that Carlene said she had left in the snow outside the crime scene. Both items were logged and sent to the lab. With Carlene's statement on record, investigators turned their attention to the man she had accused. "Obviously, we really wanted to talk to Tyler."
Obviously, we really wanted to talk to Tyler.
One investigator noted. When they tracked Tyler down, he agreed to meet with them at the community lodge. His parents were present during the interview, and his story was completely different from Carlene's.
Tyler says he didn't bring the alcohol to this get-together. He wasn't drinking. Carlene and Jordan were drinking, and they got drunk. He says he went home, and that was in total conflict with what Carlene had to say to investigators.
Investigators were eager to dig deeper, to understand why Tyler's story contradicted Carlene's so completely. But before they could get to the bottom of it, the interview came to an abrupt halt. Tyler's parents cut the interview short.
Once they say lawyer, we can't talk to him.
But the decision to retain counsel raised red flags. Why would you lawyer up? It made me think he had something to do with it. Unable to question Tyler further, investigators obtained a search warrant for the residence where he was living. As they approached the front door, they spotted something that made their hearts race. Blood on the door jamb. "Automatically, their antennas go up," one source noted. "We've got something here." As investigators moved through the residence, the initial excitement began to fade. "I started seeing moose hair," Ching recalled. In rural Alaska, it's common for villagers to clean and skin game animals inside their homes. A field test confirmed what Ching suspected. The blood wasn't human. It was from a moose. The search of Tyler's residence yielded nothing useful. Investigators were back to square one. Then, just as they were wrapping up, an urgent message came through on the radio. "Hey, troops, you need to respond to this residence. Carlene Charlie tried to commit suicide." Investigators rushed to the home of Carlene's cousin, where they found chaos. "Everybody's crying," Ching recalled. "Carlene is hysterical, saying, 'I want to be with Jordan. I want to be with Jordan. She loves him, and she needs to be with him.'" Carlene had grabbed a kitchen knife and begun stabbing herself in the torso. Family members had wrestled the weapon away from her before she could do serious damage. Her wounds were superficial, investigators noted. She had stabbed herself, but nothing life-threatening. After a health aide examined her, a decision was made. Carlene needed to be airlifted to Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. There were no ambulances in Mento, no easy route to advanced medical care. She would have to be flown out. Carlene's suicide attempt left investigators with troubling questions. Why is she doing this? They wondered. Is she distraught over his death, or did she have something to do with this? After an intensive 16-hour investigative effort in Mento, the exhausted troopers headed back to Fairbanks.
Out here in Alaska, you got one shot to get evidence and collect evidence and that sort of thing, because once you leave the scene, it's gone. Investigator Hansen and I didn't leave until 3 o'clock the next morning, so we were exhausted trying to keep each other awake while we drove back to Fairbanks.
On the evening of May 3rd, investigators confronted Carlene at the Fairbanks Hospital, where she was recovering from her suicide attempt. Despite the circumstances, she maintained her innocence. Carlene continued to deny that she had anything to do with Jordan's death. one investigator noted. She said that she loved Jordan and would never do anything to hurt him. Carlene painted a picture of a deep, reciprocal romance. She states that we were in love and we were always meant to be together, Hansen recalled. But the investigators weren't convinced. My aha moment would have been when she tried to commit suicide, Ching admitted. At this point, Carlene was a suspect, but we just didn't have the smoking gun, so to speak. Over the following weeks, investigators made several trips back to Mento, conducting follow-up interviews and searching for anything that might advance the case. Progress was slow. Things start to slow down, one source noted. The case is not going cold, but we're not getting any results. Meanwhile, the unsolved murder was taking a devastating toll on the tight-knit village. It was hell not knowing who did this or what happened, Lori Baker recalled.
I seen a change in my village. Doors were shut, curtains were drawn early in the day. This is summertime. There was a sense of scaredness, a weird feeling, eerie feeling that I've never experienced in all my life living here.
Jordan's friends and family said their final farewells through an Athabascan tradition known as a memorial potlatch. Whenever the family is ready to say their final goodbye and let go is when they'll put a memorial, one community member explained. A memorial potlatch is the final thing you'll ever do for a loved one that has passed on. There's a song that is made that is only sung during this time, so it's a very powerful, emotional time. As the family mourned, investigators continued to focus on both Carlene and Tyler. You've got two potential suspects, one source observed. Both of them have conflicting stories. One of them's lying, or maybe both of them are lying. The investigation was no secret. Everybody knew who was being investigated, one resident noted. Tyler remained lawyered up and unreachable, so all we have here is Carlene's side of things, investigators acknowledged. Then the blood analysis results came back from the lab, and one piece of evidence stood out. Carlene's bloody sweatshirt, the one she claimed to have left in the snow outside the crime scene. There was arterial blood on the clothing. Ching explained. Arterial blood is like real frothy, like sprayed on you. It's not just like you spill blood on your leg or something like that. The implications were enormous. Carlene had claimed she got blood on her sweater while trying to save Jordan's life after finding him wounded. But arterial blood doesn't work that way. A lot of the blood that they saw on the sweatshirt was arterial blood, meaning it got on the shirt as Jordan was being stabbed, investigators realized, not from Carlene trying to save Jordan's life. Carlene's story was falling apart. Her story wasn't adding up, Ching noted. Carlene is telling us one thing. The evidence is saying something totally different. Hansen was becoming increasingly convinced of Carlene's guilt, but they still needed more to make an arrest. Almost 3 weeks after Jordan's murder, Carlene was discharged from the hospital. She couldn't return to Mento, not with the entire village watching her with suspicion. You just can't go back into a small community like that with the pure and simple fact that all eyes are on you, one source explained. So Carlene moved to Anchorage, where she went to live with her cousin Bessarine Gonzalez. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it would be her undoing. For weeks, Bessarine found herself in the role of full-time caretaker. It's almost a 24-hour job for her, caring for her cousin who continues to state that she wants to kill herself, investigators learned. Bessarine spent many days trying to console Carlene, to help her through whatever was causing her such anguish. Then, on July 16, their conversation took a dramatic turn. One day, they're holding a conversation, and Carlene comes clean to Bessarine as to why she's been feeling the way she's feeling, one source recounted. What Bessarine learned changed everything. Carlene's pain wasn't grief over losing Jordan, it was guilt. Carlene made some confessions to her about her involvement in the death of Jordan Baker, investigators reported. Bessarine told us that Carlene said she had stabbed Jordan 5 times. There it was, a confession to a family member, the most damning kind of admission. There's nothing tighter than somebody saying to their family, "I did it," one investigator noted. There's no coercion there. She came to them. "I did it. I can't live like this. I did it." Bessarine found herself facing an impossible choice. Carlene was family, but what she had done was unforgivable. In the end, Bessarine's conscience won out. She contacted the Alaska State Troopers. I think Bessarine was just a good person, Ching reflected. What her cousin did was wrong, and so she felt compelled to do the right thing. When investigator Hansen received the call, she immediately saw an opportunity. I asked her if she's willing to talk to Carlene on a wire, Hansen recalled, basically a recorded conversation, and she said that she was. Hansen obtained a search warrant authorizing the recorded conversation. Then she and Ching flew to Anchorage. Within hours, they were fitting Besserine with audio recording equipment and coaching her on what to say. The plan is, when she comes in, we set her up with audio devices, one investigator explained. She says that she's going to talk with Carlene, and they're going to go for a walk, and in this walk is where she's going to try to get her to confess again. Besserine was terrified, and understandably so. She was very nervous, as anybody would be. Ching acknowledged. She had a lot of concerns, but her wanting to do right overcame any of her fears, and she cooperated. Investigators watched from a distance as Carlene and Besserine set off on their walk. Just as she had been coached, Besserine encouraged her cousin to open up. "Just come clean," she urged. "Get it off your chest. You know, if it's something you got to say, just say it. Just tell me. Tell me what happened."
With investigators listening in, Carlene starts talking about the whole thing, just like she had initially told investigators that he made dinner for us, and we got drunk, and it was the whole same thing going on.
But then the narrative shifted. What she initially didn't tell investigators is the real reason she left the house, one source explained. Jordan had told her to leave, said him and Tyler were going to be hanging out. Jordan had cussed at her and kicked her out. After all the years of hoping, of dreaming, of convincing herself that they would end up together, he had rejected her in the most humiliating way possible. She was pissed off. She was upset. She left. But Carlene didn't go to her grandmother's house for a bandage, as she had originally claimed. After Jordan kicked her out, she was so mad that she went to her family member's house and grabbed a knife, and then she came back. Carlene waited outside in the darkness, watching the house, seething with rage. When Tyler finally left, she made her move. After he left, that's when she went in. What happened next was swift and brutal. Carlene and Jordan got into a fight, and then she stabbed him 5 times. As Jordan lay dying on the couch, he managed to speak his final words. Carlene told Besserine what he said. She said that Jordan said, "Why do you love me so much?" The confession was everything investigators needed. We had visual on them the whole time, Ching confirmed. Our confession met all the elements that we needed for the arrest. Hansen gave the green light. Officers who had been watching from nearby moved in. They all swarmed in and placed her under arrest. One source recalled. She was taken into custody. I recall her saying, "What's going on? What's going on?" real confused. Of course, Carlene knew exactly what was going on. She had just confessed everything to her cousin. Once in custody, she invoked her right to remain silent and requested an attorney. But it didn't matter. They had her confession on tape. News of Carlene's arrest spread quickly from Anchorage to Mento. A lot of emotions came, Lori Baker remembered.
A lot of emotions came. People gathered at my home once they found out. Tears were flowing.
One resident said, for months after, like she had nothing to do with it. With Carlene in custody, investigators worked to understand what had driven her to commit such a brutal act against someone she claimed to love. The answer, they concluded, lay in her delusions about their relationship. In her mind, she had created this relationship, one investigator observed. She had created this idea that they were going to get married. The reality was far different. I don't believe that that love was reciprocated, which added fuel to that fire. On the night of May 2, when Jordan rejected Carlene and told her to leave so he could hang out with Tyler, something inside her snapped. When she was rejected, she was asked to leave, she just went crazy, one source explained.
Love fueled hate and anger, ended in tragedy.
The killing itself spoke to the depth of her rage. It just infuriated her enough to go grab a knife, come back, and brutally kill him, investigators noted. It was just such a rage killing that it was fueled by jealousy, rage, and anger. Jordan Baker never wanted the kind of relationship Carlene had imagined. He had made that clear to her countless times. But she couldn't accept it, and when faced with yet another rejection, she chose to ensure that if she couldn't have him, no one would. Prosecutors prepared to take Carlene Charlie to trial on charges of first-degree murder. She faced a potential sentence of 20 to 99 years in prison without the possibility of parole. But in March 2014, word came that Carlene had agreed to a plea deal. Her lawyers came in with a plea deal, so there was no trial, one source explained. It was just a reduced count, murder in the second degree. The Baker family was devastated by the agreement. The family was not happy with that plea deal, one investigator recalled. I remember specifically Jordan's mother. She was so upset. In May 2015, Carlene Charlie entered a Fairbanks courtroom to receive her sentence. Before the judge pronounced his ruling, Jordan's loved ones were given the opportunity to address the woman who had taken him from them. Lori Baker approached the podium and looked directly at the woman who had murdered her son. Her words were not what anyone expected. I looked at her and I exactly told her I didn't hate her, but I actually felt sorry for her, Lori recalled, and that I could look at her and tell her that I forgive her. When given the chance to speak, Carlene addressed the Baker family. What she said next would haunt Lori forever.
She said the last thing Jordan was yelling for, and she looked right at me. She said it was you. She said he wanted you, yelling for you.
In his final moments, as his life drained away from 5 stab wounds, Jordan Baker had called out for his mother. I'll never forget that, Lori said. That literally still sitting here. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The judge sentenced Carlene Charlie to 20 years in prison. The reaction in the courtroom was one of heartbreak and anger. This mother was just devastated. One observer recalled, one of the quotes that she said was, "You get more time in jail for killing an animal in Alaska than you do a human being." The events of the 2nd of May, 2013, will not be soon forgotten in Mento, Alaska, a place where one woman's dreams of marriage and romance transformed into jealousy and murderous rage. You have a 24-year-old young lady that had her whole life in front of her, one investigator reflected. And here's a young man who had his whole life ahead of him. And she killed him because he didn't want to take things to another level. He paused before delivering his verdict on the case. I only got one word for that: senseless. Despite the tragic end to her son's life, Jordan's mother has chosen to break the cycle of hatred. Not only did she ruin our lives, she ruined herself for being so young. If you'd like to see select new videos early and help us keep uncovering case files that rarely come to light, you'll find extra footage and unseen details on our Patreon. Channel memberships here on YouTube also include early access to select new videos.